The Longest Day wasn't just a war film, it was war. 3 directors, 5 languages, thousands of soldiers, real beaches, real blood. And one producer who bet everything on a single day that changed history. But behind the invasion, nothing went as planned. Veterans collapsed on set. Actors rewrote history. In one scene, they blew up an actual French town. These are 20 secrets about The Longest Day hidden for decades. And the bonus, John Wayne almost drowned for real, and nobody stopped filming. Lock and load. This mission gets brutal fast. Number 1. Before a single frame was shot, Darryl F. Zanuck made a decision that terrified the studio. He mortgaged his house, not as a backup plan, as collateral. 20th Century Fox was bleeding money after Cleopatra nearly bankrupted them, and nobody wanted to fund another epic, especially not a 3-hour war movie in black and white. But Zanuck didn't just believe in The Longest Day. He staked his entire fortune on it. He personally financed millions out of pocket, risking financial ruin if the film failed. Studio executives watched in horror as he poured money into authentic uniforms, real military equipment, and location shoots across France. They called it madness. They said audiences wanted color, wanted spectacle, wanted Elizabeth Taylor, not dead soldiers on a beach. But Zanuck refused to compromise. He'd served in World War II. He knew what D-Day looked like, and he wasn't going to fake it. So, while the studio hedged their bets and prepared for disaster, Zanuck kept writing checks. His house, his savings, his legacy, all of it riding on June 6th, 1944. And when the film finally premiered, it didn't just succeed. It became the highest-grossing black and white film ever made. The studio got their money back. Zanuck got his house back, and Hollywood learned that sometimes the biggest risk is the only one worth taking. Number 2. Most war films hire one director. The Longest Day hired 3. Not because of creative vision, because of language. Ken Anakin directed the British and French sequences. Andrew Martin handled the American scenes. Bernhard Wicki took the German perspective. 3 languages, 3 crews, 3 completely different shooting styles. And Zanuck, he tried to coordinate all of it from a command tent like he was running the actual invasion. It was chaos. Anakin wanted elegance and restraint. Martin wanted action and explosions. Wicki wanted authenticity and moral complexity. They barely spoke to each other. Scripts were written in English, then translated into French and German, without anyone checking if the translations matched the original tone. Actors would show up expecting one kind of scene and find themselves in something completely different. John Wayne's American bravado clashed with Richard Burton's British stoicism. The French cast thought they were making an art film. The Germans thought they were making a documentary. And through it all, Zanuck kept pushing forward, refusing to let the production collapse under its own weight. What should have been a disaster somehow worked, because each director brought something different. Anakin brought grace. Martin brought intensity. Wicki brought truth. And when all 3 visions collided on screen, it didn't feel like a movie. It felt like you were there, watching history unfold in 3 different languages, 3 different perspectives, all happening at once. The Longest Day in cinematic history wasn't just D-Day. It was every single day of that shoot. Number 3. Richard Burton almost walked off the set. Not because of the script, because of the schedule. Burton was contracted for exactly 4 days of shooting. 4 days to play an RAF pilot. But when he arrived in France, Zanuck told him the shoot was running behind. Way behind. They needed him for 6 days, maybe 7. Burton's agent had already booked him for another project. The dates were locked. The contracts were signed. If Burton stayed, he'd breach his next film and face a lawsuit. Zanuck didn't negotiate. He didn't threaten. He just said, "We'll work faster." And they did. The crew filmed Burton's scenes in a 72-hour sprint. No breaks, no retakes unless absolutely necessary. Burton showed up at dawn, stayed under the lights until midnight, delivered his lines with exhaustion bleeding through every word. And somehow, that exhaustion made the performance better. He wasn't acting like a tired pilot. He was a tired pilot. Burton later said it was one of the most grueling shoots of his career. But when he finally left the set, collapsing into a car headed for the airport, he'd given Zanuck exactly what he needed. A performance that didn't look like acting. It looked like survival. Number 4. John Wayne didn't want to be there. Not at first. He'd spent his entire career playing American heroes, and now Zanuck wanted him to play a supporting role. A glorified cameo as Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Vandervoort. Wayne's agent told him to pass. Too small, too risky. Not enough screen time for a star of his caliber. But Zanuck didn't beg. He challenged. He told Wayne that if he really cared about honoring D-Day veterans, he'd show up and do his part. No ego, no demands, just service. That hit Wayne hard. He'd never served in World War II. He'd stayed in Hollywood while men his age stormed beaches and died in foxholes, and it haunted him. So he said yes, not for the money, not for the billing, but because this was his chance to finally pay tribute. And when he arrived in France, he didn't act like a star. He showed up early. He stayed late. He talked to the real veterans Zanuck had hired as extras, listening to their stories, asking about their experiences. He even insisted on doing his own stunts, including a parachute landing scene that went horribly wrong. Wayne landed hard, twisted his ankle, and collapsed. The medic rushed over, but Wayne waved him off. He limped through the rest of the shoot without complaint. No special treatment. No delays, because in his mind, this wasn't a movie, it was a memorial. And John Wayne, for all his Hollywood swagger, knew that some roles matter more than the size of the part. Number 5. The opening scene almost killed the production before it started. Zanuck wanted to film the Allied paratroopers landing in Normandy at night. Real planes, real jumps, real danger. The French military provided transport aircraft and experienced pilots. Everything was planned. Everything was safe. Until the weather turned. Fog rolled in thick and heavy, cutting visibility to near zero. The pilots couldn't see the ground. The cameras couldn't capture anything. And the actors, they were terrified. But Zanuck refused to postpone. He'd blocked off the airfield. He'd assembled the crew. He'd spent a fortune getting everyone in position. So he made a call, fly lower. The pilots protested. Flying at that altitude in zero visibility with a plane full of actors was borderline suicidal, but Zanuck didn't budge, and the planes took off. The actors sat in silence as the aircraft descended through the fog, engines roaring, metal rattling. No idea how close they were to the ground. When the jump light turned green, some refused to move. Others closed their eyes and leaped into the void, praying they'd hit the drop zone and not a tree or a barn. Cameras on the ground rolled blind, hoping to catch something, anything. And when the fog finally lifted, they had their footage. Grainy, chaotic, terrifying. It didn't look staged. It looked like war, because in that moment, it was. The crew had risked everything for a single shot. And Zanuck, watching from below, didn't apologize. He just moved on to the next scene, because The Longest Day wasn't about playing it safe. It was about showing the truth, no matter the cost. Number 6. They didn't hire extras. They hired witnesses. Zanuck put out a call across France, asking for D-Day veterans to appear in the film, not as actors, as themselves. Hundreds responded, old men who'd stormed those beaches, pilots who'd flown those missions, medics who'd carried the wounded. And when they arrived on set, something unexpected happened. They started correcting the script. One veteran stopped production cold during a battle sequence, pointing at the American soldiers and saying, "That's not how we moved. We stayed lower. We didn't run straight, we crawled." Another veteran, a French resistance fighter, told the director that the German uniforms were wrong. Small details, wrong buttons, wrong insignia, wrong boots. Zanuck didn't get defensive. He listened. He made changes. He gave these men a voice they'd never had before. And in return, they gave him authenticity no amount of research could provide. Some days, filming would stop entirely while a veteran told his story. The cast and crew would gather around, silent, as an old man described what it was like to watch his friends die, to pull bodies from the surf, to hold a dying soldier's hand as the tide came in. There were no cameras rolling during those moments. No one was performing. It was just memory, raw, unfiltered, and still bleeding after 20 years. And when filming resumed, the actors didn't just play soldiers. They carried those stories with them. Every glance, every movement, every moment of fear, because they'd heard the truth. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. The Longest Day wasn't a reenactment. It was a remembrance. and the veterans, they made sure of it. Number 7. The German dialogue wasn't translated for American audiences. That was the radical decision. When German officers spoke, there were no subtitles, no voiceover, no explanation. You either understood German or you didn't. Studio executives panicked. They argued it would alienate audiences, confuse viewers, kill the pacing. They demanded Zanuck add subtitles in post-production. Zanuck refused. He said that American soldiers on D-Day didn't understand German either. They heard orders being shouted, commands being screamed, conversations in a foreign tongue, and they had no idea what was being said. That confusion, that disorientation, that was part of the experience. So Zanuck kept it. And when audiences saw the film, something strange happened. They leaned forward. They paid attention. They watched the German officers' faces, their body language, their tone. They didn't need to understand every word to know what was happening. Fear, doubt, desperation. It was all there. And by refusing to translate, Zanuck forced viewers to see the Germans not as villains in a script, but as soldiers. Human beings caught in the same nightmare, speaking a different language, but feeling the same terror. Critics called it brilliant. Others called it confusing, but Zanuck didn't care about the debate. He cared about the truth, and the truth was messy. The truth didn't come with subtitles. It came with uncertainty, with fear, with the knowledge that war doesn't pause to explain itself. The Longest Day showed audiences what D-Day actually felt like. And sometimes that meant not understanding everything, because the men who were there didn't understand everything either. They just fought. And that was enough. Number 8. Robert Mitchum showed up drunk. Not once, repeatedly. He played Brigadier General Norman Cota, the officer who rallied American troops pinned down on Omaha Beach. It should have been one of the film's most powerful performances, but Mitchum didn't care. He'd seen combat in real life. He'd lost friends, and playing a general barking orders at actors pretending to die, it felt obscene. So he drank. Between takes, during lunch, sometimes before the cameras even rolled. Zanuck knew. Everyone knew. But Mitchum was too big a star to replace, and the schedule was too tight to reshoot, so they worked around it. Anakin, his director, started filming Mitchum's scenes early in the morning before he had time to drink. They shot fast, kept takes short, moved on before Mitchum lost focus. And somehow, the performance worked. That weariness in Mitchum's eyes, that gravelly, exhausted voice. It wasn't acting. It was a man who'd seen too much, felt too much, and couldn't pretend anymore. You can see it in his close-ups, the way he pauses, the way his jaw tightens, the way he looks at the young actors playing soldiers and sees ghosts. Mitchum later admitted he hated the film. Not the final product, but the process, the noise, the explosions, the fake blood. It brought back memories he'd spent years trying to bury, so he drank to numb it. And in doing so, he gave one of the most haunting performances of his career. Because The Longest Day didn't need a sober general, it needed a broken one. And Mitchum, drunk or not, understood that better than anyone. Number 9. They blew up a real French village, not a set, not a miniature. A real town. The village of Ouistreham had been partially destroyed during the actual D-Day invasion and never fully rebuilt. Decades later, it sat empty, crumbling, haunted. Zanuck approached the French government with a proposal. Let me finish what the war started. Let me demolish what's left, and we'll use the footage for the film. The French hesitated. It was sacred ground, history. But the buildings were collapsing anyway, too dangerous to save, too expensive to restore. So they agreed. Explosives were rigged, cameras were positioned. And on a clear morning in 1961, the crew detonated charges that sent walls crumbling, roofs collapsing, debris flying into the air. The blast was so powerful it shook nearby towns. Windows rattled, doors swung open. And for a moment, the people of Normandy thought the war had come back. The footage was devastating, not because it was fake, but because it was real. Those weren't prop buildings. That wasn't Hollywood rubble. It was the same stone, the same streets, the same village that had been shattered by artillery 20 years earlier. And now it was gone forever, reduced to dust for a 3-hour film. Some locals called it disrespectful. others called it cathartic, a final farewell to the ruins. But Zanuck didn't apologize. He said that war destroys. And sometimes, to show destruction honestly, you have to destroy something real. The Longest Day didn't just recreate D-Day, it consumed it. And Ouistreham became part of that consumption, erased from history to preserve it on film. Number 10. Halfway through production, the money ran out. Not a budget shortfall, a full collapse. Fox's accountants called Zanuck in the middle of a shoot and told him to stop, immediately. The studio couldn't cover payroll. They couldn't afford the location rentals. They couldn't finance another week of filming. Shut it down, they said. Cut your losses. Come home. Zanuck hung up and kept filming. He didn't tell the cast. He didn't tell the crew. He just kept the cameras rolling, while Fox executives back in Los Angeles panicked. Zanuck started paying expenses out of his own pocket, again. He borrowed from friends, called in favors, convinced local vendors to extend credit. And when that wasn't enough, he made a deal with the French military. In exchange for continued use of their equipment and personnel, he promised them a share of the film's profits. It was a gamble. If The Longest Day failed, Zanuck would be ruined, and the French would never see a cent. But if it succeeded, everyone won. Fox reluctantly agreed to cover post-production costs, but only because they were already too deep to pull out. And when The Longest Day finally hit theaters and became one of the biggest hits of 1962, Fox suddenly forgot they had ever wanted to shut it down. They took credit, they celebrated, they called it a triumph. But Zanuck knew the truth. The studio had abandoned him. The French military had saved him, and his own stubbornness had kept the cameras rolling. Because sometimes, The Longest Day isn't June 6, 1944. It's every single day you refuse to quit. Number 11. The beach landing wasn't choreographed. It was survival. Zanuck hired over 1,500 extras, most of them soldiers from active military units. He divided them into waves, just like the actual invasion. First wave hits the beach, second wave follows, third wave reinforces. But he didn't tell them what to do. He just said, "Run." The cameras rolled and chaos erupted. Soldiers sprinted across the sand, explosions detonated around them, some stumbled and fell, others dove for cover behind tank traps. The ones playing German soldiers fired blanks from the bunkers. And for 10 minutes, it wasn't a movie set. It was Omaha Beach. Men screamed. Smoke filled the air. And the cameras captured everything. Later, Zanuck admitted he'd lost control during filming. He'd planned specific shots, specific angles. But once the first wave hit the beach, instinct took over. Soldiers moved like soldiers. They didn't wait for direction. They reacted. And that raw, unscripted chaos became the most powerful sequence in the film. Critics called it the most realistic depiction of D-Day ever captured. But the veterans who watched it said something different. They said it felt too real. Because it was. Number 12. Sean Connery thought he was making a thriller. He'd signed on to play Private Flanagan, a British commando. Small role, quick shoot, in and out. But when he arrived on set, he realized he'd walked into something massive. Thousands of extras, multiple directors, explosions everywhere, and his scene, it kept changing. Anakin rewrote it daily. New dialogue, new blocking, new objectives. Connery was furious. He'd just finished playing James Bond in Dr. No. He was used to control, precision, a locked script. This was madness. He threatened to walk. His agent threatened to sue. But Zanuck didn't panic. He pulled Connery aside and showed him the D-Day veterans working as extras, told him their stories, asked him if he really wanted to be the actor who quit because the shoot was too hard. Connery stayed. He filmed his scene in freezing water, holding a rifle, delivering lines while explosions went off around him. And when it was over, he never complained again. Years later, after he'd become the biggest star in the world, Connery called The Longest Day the hardest film he ever made. Not because of the work, because of the weight, the responsibility, the knowledge that he was playing men who'd actually done this. And unlike Bond, there was no escape hatch. Number 13. One stuntman refused medical treatment. During the cliff-scaling sequence at Pointe du Hoc, a rope snapped. The stuntman fell 30 feet, slammed into rocks, and didn't move. The crew rushed over. Medics prepared to call an ambulance. But when they reached him, he was already standing, blood running down his face, arm hanging at an angle. He looked at Zanuck and asked if they got the shot. They hadn't. The camera had panned away right before the fall. The stuntman nodded. "Let's go again," the medic protested. His arm was clearly broken. He needed a hospital, but the stuntman refused. He said he'd driven 6 hours to be there. He wasn't leaving without finishing his scene. So, they reset, gave him pain medication, wrapped his arm, and rolled cameras again. This time, he made the climb. Slower, shakier, but he made it. And when he finally reached the top, collapsing onto the cliff's edge, the crew erupted in applause. Zanuck called cut, walked over, and personally drove the stuntman to the hospital. No one ever learned his name. He wasn't in the credits. He didn't give interviews. He just showed up, broke his arm, and climbed a cliff anyway. Because that's what The Longest Day demanded, not acting endurance. Number 14. The ratings board wanted to shut it down. Not the whole film, one scene. The Omaha Beach sequence where American soldiers are cut down by German machine gun fire. Bodies piled in the surf. Blood mixing with seawater. Limbs scattered across the sand. The censors called it too graphic, too violent, too disturbing for 1962 audiences. They demanded cuts. Zanuck refused. He argued that D-Day was graphic, it was violent, it was disturbing, and sanitizing it would be an insult to every man who died there. The board didn't budge. They threatened to slap the film with a restricted rating, which would kill its box office potential. So, Zanuck made a deal. Show it to veterans first. If they say it's too much, I'll cut it. The screening was arranged. 200 D-Day survivors filled a theater in Washington. The lights dimmed. The beach scene played. And when it ended, the theater sat in complete silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, one veteran stood up. He was crying. He said that for 20 years, people had asked him what D-Day was like, and he could never explain it. But this was it. The room erupted in agreement, and the ratings board, they backed off, because some truths are too important to censor. Number 15. Henry Fonda almost quit over a single line. He played Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the only general who landed with the first wave at Utah Beach. Fonda loved the role, but he hated one piece of dialogue. In the script, Roosevelt says, "We'll start the war from right here." Fonda thought it sounded too heroic, too Hollywood, too fake. He told Zanuck to cut it. Zanuck refused. He said those were Roosevelt's actual words, spoken on Utah Beach, recorded in after-action reports. Fonda didn't believe him. He'd studied Roosevelt. He'd read everything he could find, and nowhere had he seen that quote. So Zanuck did something unexpected. He flew Roosevelt's son to the set, the real Theodore Roosevelt III. He sat down with Fonda and confirmed it. His father had said those exact words while standing in the surf, under fire, leading men into battle. Fonda apologized. He filmed the line, and it became one of the most iconic moments in the film. But what haunted Fonda wasn't that he'd been wrong. It was that reality had sounded too good to be true, that a general facing death had delivered a line so perfect it seemed scripted. And Fonda realized something. Heroes don't need better dialogue. They just need someone brave enough to repeat what they actually said. Number 16. They used real ammunition, not blanks, live rounds. During the German bunker scenes, the production armed defensive positions with authentic MG-42 machine guns, loaded, ready to fire. The French military supervised, but the guns were functional. When the cameras rolled and German soldiers opened fire, those were real bullets tearing across the beach. They weren't aimed at actors. They were fired over the extras' heads, into sandbags positioned safely downrange. But the sound, the muzzle flash, the heat, all of it was real. And the extras, they could hear the rounds snapping past. Some hit the ground instinctively, others froze. One soldier later admitted he'd wet himself because for a moment he forgot it was a movie. He thought he was going to die. Zanuck defended the decision. He said blanks didn't sound right, didn't feel right. If you want audiences to feel the terror of D-Day, you can't fake the bullets. Safety officers protested. Insurance companies threatened to pull coverage. But Zanuck kept filming. And when you watch the beach scene, you can see it in the extras' eyes. That's not acting. That's genuine fear. Because somewhere above their heads, real bullets were flying. and they knew it. Mount number 17. The film had no score for the first 30 minutes. Composer Maurice Jarre wrote a sweeping orchestral soundtrack. Beautiful, emotional, epic. But Zanuck cut it. All of it. He wanted the invasion to play with nothing but natural sound. Waves crashing, engines roaring, men shouting, bullets hitting metal. No music to tell you how to feel, no violins to manipulate emotion. Just the raw, chaotic symphony of war. Studio executives were horrified. Every war film had a score. Every epic needed music to carry the audience. But Zanuck said D-Day didn't have a soundtrack. The men who stormed those beaches didn't hear an orchestra. They heard screaming, and that's what audiences needed to hear. The silence lasted until the Allied forces secured the beach. Only then did Jarre's music swell, triumphant and bittersweet. And the contrast was devastating. Because after 30 minutes of pure chaos, that first note of music felt like coming up for air, like surviving. Critics called it a masterstroke. Audiences left theaters shaken, and Jarre, despite having most of his score cut, won the Academy Award. Because sometimes the most powerful music is the absence of it. And The Longest Day understood that silence, when used correctly, speaks louder than any symphony ever could. Number 18. Red Buttons insisted on drinking real whiskey. He played Private John Steele, the paratrooper whose chute caught on a church steeple in Sainte-Mère-Église. Buttons was a comedian. He'd made a career out of making people laugh. But this role, it was different. Steele had hung there for hours, watching his friends die below, powerless to help. And Buttons wanted to get it right. So during filming, he asked the prop master for actual whiskey. Not the tea they usually used, real alcohol. The prop master refused, union rules, safety regulations. But Buttons went around him. He brought his own flask, and before each take, he'd drink, not enough to get drunk. Just enough to numb himself, to quiet the part of his brain that wanted to perform. He said that Steele wasn't funny, he was traumatized, and Buttons needed to feel that. When the cameras rolled and Buttons hung from that steeple, staring down at the carnage below, something shifted. The comedy was gone. In its place, a man processing horror in real time. Zanuck never knew Buttons was drinking, not until years later. By then, it didn't matter, because the performance had worked. Buttons earned an Academy Award nomination, and he never made another joke about The Longest Day. Because some roles change you. And Private John Steele changed Red Buttons forever. Number 19. John Wayne nearly drowned. For real. During the parachute landing scene, Wayne hit the water hard. His chute collapsed on top of him, dragging him under. He was supposed to release quickly, swim to shore, but something went wrong. The harness jammed. The chute filled with water, pulling him down. Wayne thrashed, trying to free himself. Seconds passed, then longer. The crew on shore couldn't see what was happening under the surface. They thought he was acting, playing up the struggle. It was only when Wayne stopped moving that someone realized. Divers plunged in. They cut the harness, dragged Wayne to shore. He wasn't breathing. They pumped his chest. He coughed up water. And after a minute of horrified silence, he sucked in air. Zanuck ordered the cameras to stop. But Wayne, gasping and shaking, said, "Keep rolling." They protested. He needed medical attention. But Wayne refused. He'd survived. The shot was usable. And he wasn't going to waste it. So they kept filming. And when you watch that scene, Wayne's face pale, his movements slow. That's not acting. That's a man who just touched death and chose to finish his scene anyway. Because in Wayne's mind, if the real soldiers could storm beaches under fire, he could finish one take after almost drowning. Number 20. The premiere almost started a riot, not because of the film, because of who attended. Zanuck invited D-Day veterans from all sides, American, British, French, Canadian, and German, former Wehrmacht soldiers who'd defended Normandy, who'd fired on Allied troops, who'd killed men sitting in that same theater. The French resisted. They said it was too soon, too painful. But Zanuck insisted. He said the film showed all perspectives, and it deserved an audience that represented all perspectives. When the lights dimmed, the theater was electric with tension. Veterans sat in clusters, American paratroopers near the front, German infantrymen in the back. And when the battle scenes played, Something unexpected happened. They all leaned forward. They all recognized something. And when it ended, there was no applause, just silence. Then one German veteran stood. He walked to the front of the theater, found an American soldier, and without saying a word, extended his hand. The American hesitated, then took it, and slowly others followed, former enemies shaking hands, crying, remembering not the sides they fought on, but the hell they had all survived. Zanuck watched from the back. He didn't take credit. He didn't make a speech, because the longest day wasn't his victory. It belonged to them, the men who'd lived it. And finally, after 18 years, they could face it together. Bonus fact. The film's most famous line was improvised. During a night shoot, an American soldier asks Brigadier General Coda what the plan is. In the script, Coda was supposed to give a tactical response, but Mitchum, exhausted and half drunk, looked at the young actor and said, "There are two kinds of people who are staying on this beach, the dead and those who are going to die. Now, get off your butts." It wasn't in the script, it wasn't rehearsed, but Anakin kept rolling, because in that moment, Mitchum wasn't playing a general. He was channeling every officer who'd ever rallied broken men under impossible odds. When Zanuck saw the dailies, he knew immediately. That line would define the film, and it did. Veterans quoted it. Critics praised it. And decades later, it remains one of the most powerful moments in war cinema, not because someone wrote it, but because someone lived it. And Mitchum, drunk or sober, understood what needed to be said.